Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. And I am Miss Kathleen, and I'm here to welcome you to Story Hour. Story Hour, presented by NAU Theater, tells stories and reads stories from public domain. Today's stories are chapter books, which we've been reading for quite some time now. We will be continuing with The Story of Dr. Dolittle, The Five Little Peppers and How They Grew, and we have some shorter stories that we're going to share with you, presented by Miss Haley Joe. Well, let's get started. Enjoy! Today's extra stories are short stories for our younger listeners. These stories are for ages 5 to 9. Thank you.
Hi guys, welcome once again to another story hour. Again, my name is Miss Haley, and today I'm going to be reading another short story to you guys, the story of the three bears. All right, I hope you guys are ready for this one because it's a fun one. So first, she tasted the porridge of the great huge bear, and that was too hot for her. And then she tasted the porridge of the middle bear, and that was too cold for her. And then she went to the porridge of the little, small, wee bear and tasted that. And that was neither too hot nor too cold, but just right. And she liked it so well that she ate it all up. Then Goldenlocks sat down at the table of the great, huge bear, and that was too hard for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the middle bear, and that was too soft for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too soft nor too hard, but just right. So she seated herself in it. And there she sat till the bottom of the chair came out, and down she came plump upon the ground. Then Goldenlocks went upstairs into the bedchamber in which the three bears slept. At first, she lay down upon the bed of the great huge bear, but that was too high at the head for her. And then she sat down upon the bed of the middle bear, and that was a little too high at the foot for her. And then she lay down upon the bed of the little small wee bear, and that was neither too high at the head nor at the foot, but just right. So she covered herself up comfortably and lay there till she fell fast asleep. By this time, the three bears thought their porridge would be cool enough, so they came home to breakfast. Now Goldenlocks had left the spoon of the great huge bear standing in his porridge. "Somebody has been on my porridge," said the middle bear in her middle voice. Then the little small wee bear looked at his, and there was a spoon in the porridge pot, but the porridge was all gone. "Somebody has been on my porridge and has eaten it all up," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. Upon this, the three bears, seeing that someone had entered their house and eaten upon the little small wee bear's breakfast, began to look about them. Now Goldenlocks had not put the hard cushion straight when she rose from the chair of the great huge bear. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice. And Goldenlocks had squatted down the soft cushion of the middle bear. "Somebody has been sitting in my chair," said the middle bear in her middle voice. And you know what Goldenlocks had done to the third chair? "Somebody had been sitting in my chair and sat the bottom out of it," said the little small wee bear in his little small wee voice. Then the three bears thought it was necessary that they should make farther search, so they went upstairs into their bedchamber. Now Goldenlocks had pulled the pillow of the great huge bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice. And Goldenlocks had pulled the bolster of the middle bear out of its place. "Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the middle bear in her middle voice. And when the little small wee bear came to look at his bed, there was a bolster in its place, and the pillow in its place upon the bolster, and upon the pillow was the head of Goldenlocks, which was not in its place, for she had no business there. "Somebody has been lying in my bed, and here she is," said the Little Small Wee Bear in his little small wee bear voice. Goldilocks had heard in her sleep the great rough, gruff voice of the great huge bear, and the middle voice of the middle bear, but it was only as if she had heard someone speaking in a dream. But when she heard the little small wee voice of the little small wee bear, it was so sharp and so shrill that it awakened her at once. Up she started, and when she saw the three bears on one side of the bed, she tumbled herself out the other and ran to the window. Now the window was open because the bears, like good tidy bears as they were, always opened their bedchamber window when they got up in the morning. Out Goldenlocks jumped and ran away as fast as she could run, never looking behind her. And what happened to her afterwards I cannot tell, but the three bears never saw anything more of her. And that concludes the story of the three bears. Thank you for listening, guys. I'll see you later.
Our next stories are our chapter books for ages 9 to any age. Enjoy. And next up, we have Miss Rebecca reading The Five Little Peppers, or How They Grew.
Hi, Miss Rebecca here. Today I will be reading Chapter 3 of Five Little Peppers and How They Grew. Mamsie's birthday. "Run down and get the cinnamon, will you, Joey?" said Polly. "It's in the provision room." The provision room was a little shed that was tacked on to the main house and reached by a short flight of rickety steps, so called because, as Polly said, "'twas a good place to keep provisions in, even if we haven't any. And besides," she always finished, "it sounds nice. Come on, Dave, then we'll get something to eat." So the cinnamon was handed up, and then Joel flew back to Davy. And now, Polly's cake was done and ready for the oven. With many admiring glances from herself and Phronsie, who, with Seraphina, an extremely old but greatly revered doll, tightly hugged in her arms, was watching everything with the biggest of eyes from the depths of the old chair, it was placed in the oven. The door shut with a happy little bang. Then Polly gathered Phronsie up in her arms and sat down in the chair to have a good time with her and to watch the process of cooking. There was a bumping noise that came from the provision room. It sounded ominous, and then a smothered sound of words, followed by a scuffling over the old floor. "Boys?" called Polly. No answer. Everything was just as still as a mouse. "Joel and David!" called Polly again, in her loudest tones. "Yes?" came up the crooked stairs in Davy's voice. "Come up here right away." Went back again from Polly. So up the stairs trudged the two boys and presented themselves rather sheepishly before the big chair. "What was that noise?" she asked. "What have you been doing?" "'Twasn't anything but the pail," answered Joel, not looking at her. "We had something to eat," said Davy, by way of explanation. "You always let us." "I know," said Polly. "That's right. You can have as much bread as you want to. But what you've been doing with the pail?" "Nothing," said Joel. "'Twouldn't hang up, that's all." "And you've been bumping it?" said Polly. "Oh, Joel, how could you? You might have broken it. Then what would Mamsie say?" "I didn't," said Joel stoutly, with his hands in his pockets. "Bump it worse, I didn't. You know who did, though? Davy." "Why, Davy," said Polly, turning to him sorrowfully, "I shouldn't have thought you would." "Well, I'm tired of hanging it up," said little Davy vehemently. "And I said I wasn't a-gonna to, and, Joel always makes me. I've done it for like 2,000,000 times, I guess." "Oh, dear," said Polly, sinking back into the chair. "I don't know what I ever shall do here. Phronsie gets hurt, and then we want to celebrate tomorrow, and you two boys are bumping and banging out the bread pail, and—" "Oh, we won't," cried both of the children, perfectly overwhelmed with remorse. "We'll hang it up. We'll hang it right up." "I'll hang it," said Davy, clattering off down the stairs with a will. "No, I will," shouted Joel, going after him at double pace, and presently both came up with shining faces and reported it nicely done. "And now," said Polly, after they had all sat round the stove another half-hour, watching and sniffing expectantly, "the cake's done. Dear me, it's turning black." And quickly as possible, Polly twitched it out with energy and set it on the table. Oh dear, of all things in the world, the beautiful cake over which so many hopes had been formed, that was to have given so much happiness on the morrow to the dear mother, presented a forlorn appearance as it stood there in anything but holiday attire. It was quite black on the top, in the center of which was a depressing little dump, as if to say, my feelings wouldn't allow me to rise to the occasion. "Now," said Polly, turning away with a little fling and looking at the stove, "I hope you're satisfied, you old thing. You've spoiled our Mamsie's birthday." And without a bit of warning, she sat right down in the middle of the floor and began to cry as hard as she could. "Well, I never," said a cheery voice that made the children skip. "It's Mrs. Beebe! Oh, it's Mrs. Beebe!" cried Davy. "See, Polly?" Polly scrambled up to her feet, ashamed to be caught thus, and whisked away the tears. The others explaining to their new visitor the sad disappointment that had befallen them, and she was soon owing and eyeing enough to suit even their distressed little souls. "You poor creatures, you," she explained at last for about the 50th time. "Here, Polly, here's some posies for you, and—" "Oh, thank you," cried Polly with a radiant face. "Why, Mrs. Beebe, we can put them in here, can't we? The very thing." And she set the little knot of flowers in the hollow of the cake, and there they stood and nodded away to the delighted children, like brave little comforters as they were. "The very ting," echoed Mrs. Beebe, tickled to death to see their delight. "It looks beautiful, I declare, and now I must run along. I'll pale by my worrying." And so the good old woman trotted out to her waiting husband, who was impatient to be off. Mr. Beebe kept a little shoe shop in town, and always being of the impression, if he left it for 10 minutes, that crowds of customers would visit it. He was the most restless of companions on any pleasure excursion. "And Phronsie's got hurt?" said Mrs. Beebe, telling him the news as he finished tucking her up and started the old horse. "Oh, you don't say so!" he cried. "Oh!" "Dear me," said Mrs. Beebe. "How you scat me, pal, what's the matter?" "What, the little girl that bought the shoes?" asked her husband. "Yes," replied his wife, "she's hurt her foot." "Shoo now," said the old gentleman, "that's too bad," and he began to feel in all his pockets industriously. "There, can you get out again and take her that?" And he laid a small piece of peppermint candy, thick and white, in his wife's lap. "Oh, yes," cried Mrs. Beebe good-naturedly, beginning to clamber over the wheel. So the candy was handed in to Phronsie, who insisted that Polly should hold her up to the window to thank Mr. Beebe. So amid nods and shaking of hands, the Beebes drove off, and quiet settled down over the little brown house again. "Now, children," said Polly, after Phronsie had made them take a bite of her candy all around, "let's get the cake put away safe, for Mamsie may come home early." "Where'll you put it?" asked Joel, wishing the world was all peppermint candy. "Oh, in the cupboard," said Polly, taking it up. "There, Joe, you can climb up and put it clear back in the corner. Oh, wait, I must take the posies off and keep them fresh in water." So the cake was finally deposited in its place of safety, followed by the eyes of all the children. "Now," said Polly as they shut the door tight, "don't you go looking at the cupboard, Joey, or Mammy'll guess something." "Can't I just open it a little crack and take one smell when she isn't looking?" asked Joel. I should think you might, Polly, just one." "No," said Polly firmly, "not one, Joe. She'll guess if you do." But Mrs. Pepper was so utterly engrossed with her baby when she came home and heard the account of the accident that she wouldn't have guessed if there'd been a dozen cakes in the cupboard. Joel was consoled, as his mother assured him in a satisfactory way that she never should think of blaming him, and Phronsie was comforted and coddled to her heart's content. And so the evening passed rapidly and happily away, Ben smuggling Phronsie off into a corner where she told him all the doings of the day, the disappointment of the cake, and how it was finally crowned with flowers, all of which Phronsie, with no small pride in being the narrator, related gravely to her absorbed listener. "And don't you think, Benzie," she said, clasping her little hand in a convincing way over his two bigger, stronger ones, "that Polly Stowe was very naughty to make poor Polly cry?" "Yes, I do," said Ben, and he shut his lips tightly together. To have Polly cry hurt him more than he cared to have Phronsie see. "What are you staring at, Joe?" asked Polly a few minutes later, as her eyes fell upon Joel, who sat with his back to the cupboard, persistently gazing at the opposite wall. Why, you told me yourself not to look at the cupboard," said Joel in the loudest of stage whispers. "Dear me, that'll make Mammy suspect worse than anything if you look like that," said Polly. "What did you say about the cupboard?" asked Mrs. Pepper, who caught Joe's last word. We can't tell," said Phronsie, shaking her head at her mother, "'cause there's a cow." "Oh!" said Polly, and clapped her hands on the child's mouth. Don't you want Ben to tell us a story?" "Oh, yes," cried little Phronsie, in which all the others joined with a whoop of delight. So a most wonderful story, drawn up in Ben's best style, followed till bedtime. The first thing Polly did in the morning was to run to the old cupboard, followed by all the others, to see if the cake was safe. And then it had to be drawn out and dressed anew with the flowers, for they had decided to have it on the breakfast table. "It looks better," whispered Polly to Ben. "It looks better than it did yesterday. And aren't the flowers pretty?" "It looks good enough to eat, anyway," said Ben, smacking his lips. "Well, we tried," said Polly, stilling a sigh. "Now, boys, call Mamsie. Everything's ready." Oh, how surprised their mother appeared when she was ushered out to the feast, and the full glory of the table burst upon her. Her delight in the cake was fully enough to satisfy the most exacting mind. She admired and admired it on every side, protesting that she shouldn't have supposed Polly could possibly have baked it as good in the old stove. And then she cut it and gave a piece to every child, with a little posy on top. Wasn't it good, though? For like many other things, the cake proved better on trial than it looked, and so turned out to be really quite a good surprise all around. "Why can't I ever have a birthday?" asked Joel, finishing the last crumb of his piece. "I should think I might," he added reflectively. "Why, you have, Joe," said Ben. 8 of them. "What a story!" ejaculated Joel. "When did I have 'em? I never had a cake, did I, Polly?" "Not a cake birthday, Joel," said his mother. "You haven't got to that yet." "When is it coming?" asked Joel, who was decidedly of a matter-of-fact turn of mind. "I don't know," said Mrs. Pepper, laughing, "but there's plenty of time ahead."
Thank you, Miss Rebecca. And next up, I will be reading the story of Dr. Dolittle. And if you've been tuning in to my readings of this wonderful chapter book, you've probably met someone before. Hang on just a moment. Yep, Dr. Dolittle himself. If you remember, Dr. Dolittle has been made into many, many movies. But one of the very first that I can remember from my childhood was the story of Dr. Dolittle with this actor, Rex Harrison, playing Dr. Dolittle. And this toy came out of that film. And there were these little cords that you would pull, and then he would talk to you, and he would actually sing, because the version that I saw as a child was a musical. And one of my favorite songs was Talk to the Animals, which he would sing. And also I had a Push Me Pull You, which we learned a couple of chapters ago what that is. It's a two-headed, kind of looking like a llama animal. So that is our friend, and he's going to sit right over here and listen as I read the story of Dr. Dolittle. The 17th chapter, We are going to find out what's on the other side of that door. And this is called The Ocean Gossips. Right away, an axe was found, and the doctor soon chopped a hole in the door big enough to clamber through. At first, he could see nothing at all. It was so dark inside, so he struck a match. The room was quite small, no window, the ceiling very low. For furniture, there was only a little stool. All around the room, there were big barrels, and they stood against the walls, fastened at the bottom so they wouldn't tumble with the rolling of the ship. And above the barrels, there were pewter jugs of all sizes that hung from wooden pegs. There was a strong, winey smell, and in the middle of the floor sat a little boy, about 8 years old, crying bitterly. "I declare, it's the pirates' rum room," said Jip. "Yes, very rum," said Gub Gub. "The smell makes me giddy." The little boy seemed rather frightened to find a man standing there before him, when all those animals staring in through the hole in the broken door. But as soon as he saw John Dolittle's face by the light of that match, he stopped crying and got up. You aren't one of the pirates, are you?" he asked. And then the doctor threw back his head and laughed a long, long, loud laugh. And the little boy smiled, and he took his hand. "You laugh like a friend," he said, "not like a pirate. Could you tell me where my uncle is, sir?" "I'm afraid I can't," said the doctor. "When did you see him last?" "It was the day before yesterday," said the little boy. "I said, and my uncle and I were out fishing in our own little boat, and these pirates came and they caught us. They sunk our fishing boat and brought us both onto the ship. They told my uncle that they wanted me to be a pirate like them. He was very clever at the sailing in the ship in all weathers. But he said he didn't want to be a pirate because killing people and stealing was not the work that fishermen do. And then the leader, Ben Ollie, he got very angry and he gnashed his teeth. And they said he would throw my uncle into the sea if he didn't do what they said. And then they all sent me downstairs, and I heard the noise and the fight going on above. And when they let me come up again the next day, my uncle was nowhere to be seen. I asked the pirates where he was, but they wouldn't tell me. I am very, very much afraid they threw him into the sea and drowned him." And the little boy began to cry again. Well, wait a minute," said the doctor. "Don't cry. I'll tell you, we'll have some tea in the dining room, and we'll talk it over. Maybe your uncle is quite safe all the time. You don't know that he was drowned, do you? And that's something. Perhaps we can find him for you. First, we'll go and have tea with strawberry jam, and then we'll see what can be done." All the animals had been standing around listening with great curiosity. And when they had gone into the ship's dining room and they were having tea, Dab Dab came up behind the doctor's chair and whispered, "Ask the porpoises if the boy's uncle was drowned. They'll know." "All right," said the doctor, taking a second piece of bread and jam. "What are those funny clucking noise you are making with your tongue?" asked the boy. "Oh, I just said a couple of words in duck language," said the doctor. "This is Dab Dab, one of my pets." "I didn't even know that ducks had a language," said the boy. "Are all these other animals your pets too? What is the strange-looking one with 2 heads?" Oh, shh, 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 the doctor whispered. That's the push-me-pull-you. Don't let him know that we're talking about him. He gets so dreadfully embarrassed. Tell me, how did you come to be locked up in that little room? The pirates shut me in there when they were going off to steal things from another ship. When I heard someone chopping in the door, I didn't know who it could be. I was very glad to find it was you. Do you think you'll be able to find my uncle for me? Well, we are going to try very hard, said the doctor. Now, what was your uncle like to look at? Well, he had red hair, the boy answered. Very, very red hair, and the picture of an anchor tattooed on his arm. He was a strong man, a kind uncle, and the best sailor in the South Atlantic. His fishing boat was called the Saucy Sally, a cutter-rigged sloop. Oh, what's a cutter-rigged sloop? Whispered Gub-Gub, turning to Jib. Shh, that's a kind of a ship, said the man said. Oh, keep still, can't you? Oh, said the pig, is that all? I thought it was something to drink. So the doctor left the boy to play with the animals in the dining room, and he went upstairs to look for passing porpoises. And soon a whole school came dancing and jumping through the water on their way to Brazil. When they saw the doctor leaning on the rail of his ship, they came over to see how he was getting on. And the doctor asked them if they had seen anything of a man with red hair and an anchor tattooed to his arm. Do you mean the master of the Saucy Sailor? Asked one of the porpoises. Yes, said the doctor, that's the man. Has he been drowned? His fishing sloop was sunk, said the porpoises, for we saw it lying on the bottom of the sea, but there was nobody inside it because we went and looked. His little nephew is on the ship with me, said the doctor, and he's terribly afraid that the pirates threw his uncle out into the sea. Would you be so good as to find out for me, for sure, whether he has been drowned or not? Oh, he isn't drowned, said the porpoises. If he were, we would surely have heard about it from the deep sea decapods. We hear all the saltwater news. The shellfish call us the ocean gossips. No, tell the little boy we are very sorry. We don't know where his uncle is, but we are quite certain he hasn't been drowned at sea. So the doctor ran downstairs with the news and told the nephew, who clapped his hands with happiness. And the push-me-pull-you took the little boy on his back and gave him a ride around the dining room table, while all the other animals followed around, beating dish covers and with spoons and pretending that it was a parade. The Story of Dr. Dolittle, the 18th chapter. And this one is called Smells. Our uncle must now be found, said the doctor. That is the next thing, now that we know he wasn't thrown out to sea. Then Dab-Dab, the duck, came up to him again and whispered, ask the eagles to look for the man. No living creature, quack, 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 can see better than an eagle. When they are miles high in the air, they can count the ants crawling on the ground. Ask the eagles. So the doctor sent one of the swallows to get some eagles. And in about a half an hour, a little bird came back with 6 kinds of eagles. A black eagle, a bald eagle, a fish eagle, a golden eagle, an eagle vulture, and a white-tailed sea eagle. Twice as high as the boy they were, each and every one of them. And they stood on the rail of the ship like round-shouldered soldiers, all in a row, stern and stiff, and their great gleaming black eyes shot darting glances here and there and everywhere. Gub-Gub, was so scared of them, and he got behind a barrel. He said that he felt as though those terrible eyes were looking right inside him, as if he had stolen their lunch. And the doctor said to the eagles, "A man has been lost, a fisherman, with red hair and an anchor marked on his arm. Would you be so kind as to see if you can find him for us? The boy is the man's nephew." Eagles do not talk very much, and they all answered in their husky voice with only a few words. "You may be sure we will do all our best for John Dolittle." And then they flew off, and Gub-Gub came out from behind his barrel to see them go. Up, up, and up they went, higher and higher and higher still. Then, when the doctor could only just see them, they parted company and started going off in all different directions. Some went north, some went east, some went south, some went west, looking like tiny grains of black sand creeping across the wide blue sky. "My gracious," said Gub-Gub in a hushed voice. "What a height! I wonder they don't scorch their feathers, they're so near the sun." They were gone a long time, and when they came back, it was almost nighttime. And the eagles said to the doctor, "We have searched all the seas and all the countries and all the islands and all the cities and all the villages and half of this world, but we have failed. In the main street of Gibraltar, we saw 3 red hares lying on a wheelbarrow before the baker's door. But they were not the hairs of the man. They were the hairs of a fur coat. Nowhere on land or water could we see any sign of the boy's uncle, and we could not see him. Then he is not to be seen. For John Dolittle, we have done our very best." Then the 6 great birds flapped their big wings and flew back to their homes in the mountains and in the rocks. "Well," said Dab-Dab after they had gone, "what are we gonna do now? The boy's uncle must be found. There's no 2 ways about that. Quack, quack, quack. The lad isn't old enough to be knocking around the world by himself. Boys aren't like ducklings. They have to be taken care of till they're quite old. I wish Chi-Chi were here. He would soon find that man. Good old Chi-Chi. I wonder now where he's getting on." "I don't think so much of those eagle fellows," said Jip. They are very conceited. They may be very, very good eyesight and all that, but when you ask them to find a man for you, they can't do it. And they have the cheek to come back and say that nobody else could do it. And they're conceited, like the collie in Puddle Bay. And I don't think a whole lot of these gossipy old porpoises either. All they could do is tell us that the man isn't at sea. Well, we don't want to know where he isn't. We want to know where he is." "Oh, don't talk so much," said Gub-Gub. "It's easy to talk, but it is so easy to find a man when you have got the whole world to hunt him in. Maybe the fisherman's hair has turned white, worrying about the boy, and that's why the eagles couldn't find him. You don't know everything. You're just talking, and you're not doing anything to help. You couldn't find that boy's uncle any more than the eagles. You couldn't do as well." "Couldn't I?" said the dog. "That's all you know, you stupid piece of warm bacon. I haven't begun to try yet, have I? You wait and see." Then Jip went to the doctor and said, "Ask the boy if anything in his pocket that belongs to his uncle, will you please?" So the doctor asked him, and the boy showed them a gold ring in which he wore on a piece of string around his neck because it was too big for his finger. He said his uncle gave it to him when they saw the pirates coming. Jip smelt the ring, and he said, "That's no good. Ask him if he has anything else that belonged to his uncle." Then the boy took from his pocket a great big red handkerchief, and he said, "This was my uncle's too." As soon as the boy pulled it out, Jip shouted, "Jingle! Black rappy snuff," he said. Then the boy took from his pocket a great big red handkerchief and said, "This was my uncle's too." As soon as he pulled it out, Jip shouted, "Snuff, by jingo! Black rappy snuff! Don't you smell it? His uncle took snuff. Ask him, doctor." The doctor questioned the boy again, and he said, "Yes, my uncle took a lot of snuff." "Fine," said Jip. "This man is as good as found. 'Twill be as easy as stealing milk from a kitten." "Tell the boy I'll find his uncle for him in less than a week. Let us go upstairs and see which way the wind is blowing." "But it's dark now," said the doctor. "You can't find him in the dark." "But it's dark now," said the doctor. "You can't find him in the dark." "I don't need any light for a man who smells like black rappy stuff," said Jip as he climbed the stairs. "If the man had a hard smell like string now or hot water, I would need some light. But this is different. This is snuff. Tut, tut, tut." "Does hot water have a smell?" asked the doctor. "Certainly it has," said Jip. "Hot water smells quite different than cold water. It's warm water or ice that is really difficult to smell. Why, I once followed a man for 10 miles on a dark night by the smell of that hot water he had used to shave with, for the poor fellow had no soap. Now then, let us see which way the wind is blowing." Wind is very important in long-distance smelling. It mustn't be too fierce of a wind, and of course, it must be blowing in the right way. A nice, steady, damp breeze is best of all. Ha! This wind is from the north. Then Jip went up to the front of the ship and smelt the wind. And he started muttering to himself, "Tar, spinach, onions, kerosene oil, wet raincoats, crushed laurel leaves, rubber burning, lace curtains being washed. No, my mistake. Lace curtains hanging out to dry. And foxes, hundreds of them, cubs, and..." "Can you really smell all those different things in this one wind?" asked the doctor. "Why, of course," said Jip. "And those are only a few of the easy smells. The strong ones, any mongrel could smell those with a cold in his head. Wait now, wait, and I'll tell you some of the harder scents that are coming on this wind, a few of the dainty ones." Then the dog shut his eyes tight, poked his nose straight up in the air, and sniffed hard with his mouth half open. For a long time he said nothing. He kept as still as a stone. He hardly seemed to be breathing at all. When at last he began to speak, it sounded almost as though he were singing sadly in a dream. "Bricks," he whispered very low. "Old yellow bricks, crumbling with age in a garden wall. The sweet breath of young cows standing in a mountain stream. The lead roof of a dovecote, or perhaps a granary with a midday sun on it, black kid gloves lying in a bureau drawer of walnut wood, a dusty road with horses, drinking trough beneath the sycamores, little mushrooms bursting through the rotting leaves, and any parsnips? Asked Grub. No, said Jip. You always think of things to eat. No parsnips whatsoever. And no snuff. Plenty of pipes and cigarettes and a few cigars, but no snuff. We must wait till the wind changes to the south. Yes, it's a poor wind, that, said Gub. I think you're a fake, Jip. Who ever heard of finding a man in the middle of the ocean just by smell? I told you you couldn't do it. Look here, said Jip, getting really angry. You're going to get a bite on your nose in a minute. You needn't think that just because the doctor won't let us give you what you deserve, that you can't be as cheeky as you like. Stop quarreling, said the doctor. Stop it. Life is too short. Tell me, Jip, where do you think those smells are coming from? From Devon and Wales, most of them, said Jip. The wind is coming that way. Well, said the doctor. You know, that's really quite remarkable. Quite. I must make note of that for my new book. If you could train me to smell as well as that, but no, perhaps I'm better off the way I am. Enough is as good as a feast, they say. Let's go down to supper. I'm quite hungry. So am I, said Gub. And that's chapter 18. The 19th chapter, The Rock. Up they got early the next morning, out of their silken beds, and they saw that the sun was shining brightly and that the wind was blowing from the south. Jip smelt the south wind for a half an hour. Then he came to the doctor, shaking his head. I smell no snuff as yet, he said. We must wait till the wind changes to the east. But even the east wind came at 3 o'clock that afternoon. The dog could not catch the smell of snuff. The little boy was terribly disappointed, and he began to cry again, saying that no one seemed to be able to find his uncle for him. But all Jip said to the doctor was, tell him that when the wind changes to the west, I'll find his uncle, even though he may be in China, so long as they're still taking black rap snuff. 3 days they had to wait before the west wind came up. This was on a Friday morning, early, just as it was getting light. A fine, rainy mist of the sea, like a thin fog, came down, and the wind was soft and warm and wet. As soon as Jip woke, he ran upstairs and he poked his nose in the air. Then he got the most frightfully excited and rushed downstairs again to wake the doctor up. Doctor, he cried, I've got it! Doctor, wake up, listen, I've got it. The wind's from the west and it smells of nothing but snuff. Come upstairs and start the ship, quick! So the doctor tumbled out of bed and went to the rudder to steer the ship. Now, I'll go up front, said Jip, and you watch my nose. Whichever way I point it, you turn the ship the same way. The man cannot be far off. The smell is so strong. Oh, it's so strong. And the wind's all lovely and wet. Now watch me. So all that morning, Jip stood at the front part of the ship, sniffing the wind and pointing the way for the doctor to steer. While all the animals and the little boy stood around with their eyes wide open, watching the dog with wonder. After lunchtime, Jip asked Dab Dab to tell the doctor that he was getting worried and wanted to speak to him. So Dab Dab went and fetched the doctor from the other end of the ship, and Jip said to him, "The boy's uncle is starving. We must make the ship go as fast as we can." "How do you know he's starving?" asked the doctor. "Because there's no other smell in the west wind but snuff," said Jip. "If the man were cooking or eating food of any kind, I would be bound to smell it too. But he hasn't even fresh water to drink. All he is taking snuff in large pinches. We are getting nearer to him all the time because the smell grows stronger and stronger, every minute. But make the ship go as fast as you can, for I am certain this man is starving." "All right," said the doctor, and he sent Dab Dab to ask the swallows to pull the ship the same way they had done when the pirates were chasing them. So the stout little birds came down and once again harnessed themselves to the ship. And now the boat went bounding through the waves at a terrible speed. It went so fast that the fishes in the sea had to jump out of the way for their lives, or they would have been run over. I'm going to try that one again. And now the boat went bounding through the waves at a terrible speed. It went so fast that the fishes of the sea had to jump out of the way for their lives or get run over. And all the animals got tremendously excited, and they gave up looking at Jip and turned to watch the sea in front, to spy out for the land and the islands where the starving man might be. But hour after hour went by, and still the ship went rushing on over the same flat sea with no land anywhere in sight. And now the animals gave up chattering and sat around silent, anxious, and miserable. The little boy again grew very sad, and on Jip's face there was a worried look. At last, late in the afternoon, just as the sun was going down, the owl Tutu, who was perched on the tip of the mast, suddenly startled them by crying out at the top of his voice, "Jip! Jip! I see great rock in front of us. Look away there where the sky and the water meet. See the sun shining on it like gold. Is the smell coming from there?" And Jip called back, Yes, that's it. That's where the man is at last. And when they got nearer, they could see the rock was very large indeed, as large as a big field. No trees grew on it, no grass, nothing. The great rock was as smooth and as bare as the back of a tortoise. Then the doctor sailed the ship right around to the rock, but nowhere on it could a man be seen. All the animals screwed up their eyes and looked as hard as they could, and John Dolittle got the telescope from downstairs, and not one living thing could they spy, not even a gull, not a starfish, nor a shred of seaweed. They all stood still and listened, straining their ears for any sound, but the only noise they heard was the gentle lapping of the little waves against the side of their ship. Then they all started calling, "Hello there! Hello! till their voices were hoarse, but only the echo came back from the rock. Hello, hello, hello. And the little boy burst into tears. I'm afraid I shall never see my uncle again. What shall I tell them when I get home? But Jip called to the doctor. He must be there. He must. The smell goes no further. He must be there. I tell you, sail the ship close to the rock and let me jump out onto it. So the doctor brought the ship as close as he could and let down the anchor. Then he and Jip got out of the ship onto the rock. Jip at once put his nose close down to the ground, and he began to run it all over the place. Up and down he went, back and forth, zigzagging, twisting, doubling, turning, and everywhere he went, the doctor ran behind him, close at his heels, till he was terribly out of breath. At last, Jip let out a great bark and sat down. And when the doctor came running up to him, he found the dog staring into a big, big, deep hole in the middle of the rock. The boy's uncle is down there, said Jip quietly. No wonder those silly eagles couldn't see him. It takes a dog to find a man. So the doctor got down into the hole, which seemed to be a kind of a cave or a tunnel running a long way under the ground. Then he struck a match and started to make his way along a dark passage with Jip following behind. The doctor's match soon went out, and he had to strike another, and then another, and then another. At last, the passage came to an end, and he had to strike the final match, and he found himself in a tiny room with the walls of rock. And there, in the middle of this room, his head resting on his arms, lay a man with very red hair, fast asleep. Jip went up and sniffed at something lying on the ground beside him. The doctor stooped and picked it up. It was an enormous snuff box, and it was full of black rappy. Well, what do you think is going to be happening next? What do you think that big rock is? And how did that uncle survive? Well, you're going to have to wait till we read the 20th chapter. Thank you for coming today and listening to these great chapter books. We hope you can get to the library soon and get your own copies, or you can find these stories online. They are all public domain and available on many websites. Well, that's all the time we have today. So until next time, keep reading.